Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? You know, every time you watch a fighter fight, especially when he's on the rise, obviously you learn something new about that fighter. At least most of the time, right? And this past weekend when I watched this Kovalev fight and the Mayfield versus Delarme fight, I learned a lot more about these two fighters. Let me go ahead and start off with Sergey Kovalev. One of the biggest fights that could be made, if not the biggest fight, is obviously Adonis Stevenson versus Kovalev, right? And for a while, I've been trying to figure out who would win that fight, possibly. Before I made a video and I said I'm not really sure, I need to see more opponents against Kovalev. I need to see how he does against, more smarter fighters, maybe, boxers, even if they can't box a whole lot, just a little bit better at boxing. And then I could give a little bit more of a better assessment of how I think a fight like that will possibly play out. So anyway, Kovalev, he fought a guy this past weekend by the name of Agnew, an undefeated fighter, by the way. And let me make a correction because before this fight, I said something in another video. I said that Sergey was basically fighting against a tomato can, but I take that back. First of all, I knew nothing about Agnew. I didn't even research his record or anything. But to my surprise, I find out this guy is undefeated. I find out he's American. I didn't even know he was American. But anyway, he came in this fight and he was better than a lot of people expected. He lasted a lot longer than people expected. And even though he got the shit beat out of him by Kovalev, I think I learned a lot more about Kovalev. What I learned is this man definitely has holes in his game. A lot of boxing fans, they always assume that a fighter has to take this huge step up for them to determine if this guy is worthy or not, if this guy is really the future of the sport, so on and so forth. But me, with the third eye that I have, for the most part, not saying that it's going to always be 100%, but for the most part, I can determine how good a fighter is going to be before they make that step up, even when they're fighting against bums. Because you have some elite fighters that go in there against the guy that they're supposed to blow out, and they do it flawless. They do it decisively, just like the video games, Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. You know how you get in there and you fight a guy who's not on your level, you're playing the game, right? If you were able to get what they call a flawless victory against all of these opponents that may not be on your level, right? And then you have another fighter who's on the rise and he's fighting this same type of competition, but yet he's getting tagged, he's getting caught, and he's not getting flawless victories. That right there gives you a deeper insight of what's in store in the future. Because you say to yourself, if this guy who was supposed to get beat easy, a lot of times, a prospect may be fighting a guy with 5 losses. Maybe he got knocked out in his last 2 fights or whatever the case may be. The bottom line is this prospect is supposed to destroy this guy, right? But that prospect, he goes in there and he keeps getting caught with the same jab, the same lead right hand, whatever the case may be. That tells me, I automatically look at that right there and I say to myself, well, if he's getting caught by these punches against a bum, imagine what's going to happen when he gets in the ring with a seasoned elite fighter who has a great jab, who has a great lead right hand, right? So on and so forth. And that is how I'm able to determine how good a fighter will be for the most part. Of course, I'm not trying to say I'm always right about this, but at least the majority of the time, it gives me a better vision of how things may play out in the future with these fighters, okay? For example, you take Gary Russell Jr. If you look at a lot of the opponents that he faced, you'll notice that he was able to beat these guys flawless, right? I mean, you don't see too many holes in his game. And let me just make a perfect contrast. There was an undefeated fighter by the name of Antonio Escalante. He was coming up on Golden Boy, and he was supposed to be the next big thing, right? They were bringing him up as a as a very popular prospect, and he was coming up the rankings slowly but surely, and all of a sudden he took a step up, and he was fighting against Mauricio Pastrana. Okay, now Escalante, he was supposed to destroy Pastrana because Pastrana was supposed to be considered past his prime, etc., right? So Escalante, he goes in a fight with this guy. All of a sudden, Pastrana's looking good. Pastrana's outboxing him. The fight is going back and forth. The more the fight progressed, the more Pastrana starts to take over the fight. Next thing you know, the undefeated Escalante, he's getting knocked out by a heavy underdog journeyman that he was supposed to beat easy. Now, shortly following that fight, they put Gary Russell in the ring with Mauricio Pastrana, the guy who just knocked out Escalante, right? Gary Russell gets in the ring. What does he do? He knocks this guy out in the very first round. This is what you're supposed to do when you're fighting against a guy who's not supposed to be on your level. You're supposed to make it look easy. And although Kovalev, he inflicted some serious damage on Agnew, I thought he did it in a way where he kind of exposed himself, mainly in like the first two rounds. Because what I seen from Agnew is he would back up all the way to the ropes, right? And basically, as far as I'm concerned, Agnew, he was there to serve a purpose. And his purpose was to basically expose some of the chinks in Kovalev's armor. And I think he did that. Like I said, he backed up to the ropes. He would block. Once he would block, Kovalev would try to throw those big bombs. In between Kovalev throwing those bombs, Agnew was able to catch Kovalev with perfect right-hand counters, right? And then, as the fight progressed, there were times when Agnew would just block. And then he would come out of that block, throw combinations, and he would catch Kovalev with perfect shots. Now, to Kovalev's credit, I will say that he did adjust a little bit, where he started to be a little bit more cautious when he had Agnew on the ropes. He would throw jabs, and then Kovalev would move his head back, expecting the counter to come. But I believe that Agnew, he served his purpose in this fight, okay? Before, like I was telling you guys before, I was trying to figure out who I thought would have the edge against Adonis Stevenson and Kovalev. Because, like I said, Adonis, he has his flaws too, which, I kind of question his flaws as well. And the main flaw that Adonis Steven has is he is a one-handed fighter. Adonis Stevens, he relies too much on his left hand. He goes left hand crazy a lot. And because of that, that's what makes this fight still somewhat of an even fight to me. I mean, when you have someone like Kovalev, a typical power puncher who is not the hardest to hit or find in the ring, you will generally go for the boxer. You're usually going to pick brains over brawn, right? But because Adonis, like I said, is a one-handed puncher, it really makes me question how that fight will play out. But this is what I will tell you, though. After watching this performance by Kovalev, I'm almost sure that Pascal and Bernard Hopkins would most likely beat Kovalev. Hedged by Kovalev landing a good shot and knocking these guys out. But if I'm forced to bet, I would have to bet with Bernard Hopkins and Pascal. Like I said, Pascal and Hopkins, in contrast to Adonis Stevens, they are both two-handed punchers, and they're good boxers, and they have a good defense. And Pascal, he has the same type of power that Adonis Stevens has. He may even have more power than Adonis, okay? So, that's how I see those fights playing out. I think Kovalev is a typical banger who, will be exposed soon as he gets in there with a good boxer. Not even a great boxer, just a very good, technically sound boxer. All right? Moving on. I want to talk about the upset, Kareem Mayfield versus Tomas Delarme. Now, like I told you guys before, I learned a lot watching these fights. I learned a lot about both of these two fighters, about Delarme and Kareem Mayfield. What I learned about Delarme is just because a guy gets knocked out does not mean that his career is over or even on the decline, even though this is what we see a lot of times, right? Now, just remember, Delarme, there was a time when he was in Kareem Mayfield's position, or, well, he never went as far as Kareem, as far as opposition, fighting good competition and all. But Delarme was coming up as a rising force in the sport. He was an undefeated prospect. All of a sudden, he got in the ring with Luis Abregu, whose only loss on his record was against Tim Bradley when Tim Bradley first moved up to welterweight. Delarme got knocked out by Abregu. And like I said, once he got knocked out, I think a lot of people wrote him off. You know, I kind of honestly thought he was pretty much on a decline, even though he had 4 wins in a row. But it's just hard to come back from being knocked out, especially before you even reached the top. You were on your way up and you got stopped. All right. But nevertheless, that's what I learned about Delarme. I learned that Delarme is still the same. He's pretty much the still undefeated prospect that he was before he lost. The first couple of rounds, Delarme, he looked extremely impressive. But then as like around the third, fourth round, it seemed to me like he started to fall apart a little bit. He was relying too much on holding and tying up Kareem Mayfield. He wanted no part of Mayfield on the inside. And, you know, he made it a really ugly fight. You know, it was basically, you know, stick from the outside and then tie him up. I mean, it wasn't a pretty win, but a win is a win at the end of the day. And when you beat someone like a Kareem Mayfield, and you could say you're the first person to put an L on his record, that is very impressive. So congratulations to Thomas Delarme. Now let me talk about Kareem Mayfield. Now guys, I've been pretty high on Kareem Mayfield for quite some time. He knocked out some very impressive foes. You could go back and check and look at his record. He had a lot of guys avoiding him. He's been calling out Lucas Matisse. He's been calling out Danny Garcia. And none of those guys wanted to face him. Okay? So he comes into this fight. He just got signed by Bob Arum. And let me go ahead and correct some of the people, because I know whenever we talk about someone like a Kareem Mayfield, a Gary Russell, a Guillermo Rigo, a Floyd Mayweather, a Andre Ward, a Terrence Crawford, the list goes on and on and on. For some strange-ass reason, these certain fans on YouTube, they do not like these fighters. Gee whiz, I wonder why. Anyway, Kareem Mayfield, he was calling out the top guys in his division, and they wanted no parts of Kareem Mayfield. And for the casual fans who try to defend Danny Garcia and say, oh, well, Danny Garcia is with Golden Boy and Kareem is with Top Rank, let me go ahead and clear this up right now. Kareem Mayfield, he just recently signed with Top Rank. When Kareem was calling out Danny Garcia, Kareem was still a free agent. Okay, so there's no excuses right there. But anyway, there's a reason why I'm bringing this all up. You know, fighters that he called out. I'm bringing this up because this loss may actually be a good thing and a bad thing at the same time for Kareem Mayfield. The reason why I say it may be a good thing as well as a bad thing, because look at it this way. Now, since people seen Kareem lose, some of the fighters who didn't want to get in the ring with him before, they may say, oh, you know what? I think I can beat that guy. And I truly believe that Kareem Mayfield is still a very dangerous, very vicious opponent to deal with. What Kareem Mayfield showed to me in this fight, he showed his main flaw is a guy who has a reach advantage, a guy who knows how to box, and a guy who could avoid his monstrous right hand. They'll have a good chance of beating Kareem Mayfield. Okay? These are the type of opponents that Kareem Mayfield will probably need to stay away from until he goes back to the drawing board and learns how to beat a guy with that type of style. So like I said before, guys, I still think that Kareem Mayfield has a bright future. I think a lot of fighters are going to come out from hiding and actually fight him now, and we'll see what happens in the future. Now, as for Delarme, I still have a few questions for him, because even though he beat an undefeated Kareem Mayfield, it still seemed like he got hurt a couple times throughout this fight, so I question his chin. But we'll see how he does in the future. So that's pretty much all I got, guys. I'm on to the next one.